You're listening to a Roddenberry podcast.
Welcome into another episode of Mission Log The Orville, where each week we discuss an episode of The Orville and open up that jar of pickles to discuss meanings, morals, and messages, and to see if the episodes align with the Roddenberry Star Trek philosophy.
Except this week. This week we're joined by executive producer of The Orville, David A. Goodman. He's from New Rochelle, New York, the fictional home of Rob Petrie on The Blank Van Blank Show. He's the resident krill expert for the Planetary Union and the author of the Orville comic books, as well as Space Job and The Masked Macher.
Oh,
hi.
You can.
Hey,
hi. Yeah, I was actually supposed to say more.
Back to you, Jess.
You can hear all about David's bona fides on Mission Log The Orville Supplemental episode number 1, which means he was our first supplemental guest. Is that correct, Mike?
That is correct.
Wow. Suffice it to say, David is accomplished. He is a good man, and he's a writer-producer who's worked on The Golden Girls, Wings, Dream On, Futurama, Star Trek Enterprise, Family Guy, and The Orville.
And as always, we invite you to share your thoughts, ideas, and tell us what we missed at ML_The Orville on Twitter, Mission Log Pod on Facebook. You can email us at missionlog-theorville@roddenberry.com. And if you're watching this on the Roddenberry YouTube channel, please hit like and subscribe. And remember, we may use your comments on an upcoming episode.
David, do you think
Did you mention
podcasts...
Hysteria?
Not yet.
No, but we're always supposed to remember our first, right? And David, you were our first
You're
supplemental
supposed to say,
episode.
And the upcoming Hysteria on Peacock. I don't want
Okay, let me take it again.
anybody at Peacock
Hold
on.
on. The Orville and the upcoming major hit, Hysteria. You know, it's giving me the vibe that it's like it would fit really well into the Riverdale world. Is that...
Not really. It's a little
Okay.
more. I mean, it might appeal to Riverdale fans,
There we go. Okay.
but I think that there's probably definitely some overlap. I'm gonna be honest. I haven't watched a lot of Riverdale.
I actually surprisingly... I never ever thought I would have watched it, and then I got sucked into it last year, and it's I think they have the honor of being good bad, and Hysteria looks like it's going to be good, but still have like that drama high school thing going on.
It does, but it was created by a guy named Matthew Scott Kane, who just steeped in horror and wrote this great sort of historical piece about these kids in the 80s doing a heavy metal band and decide to be Satanists just at the absolute wrong time.
Right.
And,
with the satanic scare.
Satanic panic. And there's something going on in the small town in Michigan, and that's where Matt grew up. And it's really great cast: Bruce Campbell, Julie Bowen, Anna Camp, and a great group of kids, and great music, and also this horror element, and that's very scary.
And good for you, man. That sounds like fun. Julie Bowen, just amazing in
Billy Madison or
no,
Happy Gilmore?
No, the Ed O'Neill show she just got off of a few years ago.
Modern Family.
Yeah, but she was what I was thinking of particularly was a Netflix film called Mixtape that I saw her in a couple of years ago, where she was just fantastic. She plays set in 1999 in the Y2K panic, and she was an overprotective young grandmother of her granddaughter, and she lost her daughter in an accident when she was about 20. So now she's very protective of the granddaughter. Just a fantastic movie and performance by Julie.
Terrific actress. Amazing.
What I really loved about what you said, because this is the first I was hearing about it, was because we follow you, was that this project scared you. What scared you about it?
Well, it's horror, and it's a very scary. Well, I always say that if the work you're doing isn't getting the reaction you want from the audience, then you're not doing your job right. So if you're doing a horror piece, I think you should find it scary.
See, now I thought you meant in like the sense that this challenged you, like you put
well,
you.
It did. That was scary too.
Got it.
Because it really wasn't my resume at all. But
usually it goes the other way around, right? Where you start horror and then you start earning money, and then
right.
I love the double entendre. Then that really works for me.
So yes, so comedy, science fiction. Is this your first foray into horror?
I mean, I've written some stuff, but I've never like really worked and made things in this area, and it was great. I mean, I've been a fan of my own. You know, I'm a big Sam Raimi fan. I'm a big,
right,
obviously big Bruce Campbell fan. He's in the show. So there's lots of stuff that I've been into, but I've never been steeped in it quite this way, and it was exciting. It's a great show. I think it came out great.
I think you're really a living example of, if you follow your heart song, you eventually start to work and find yourself in the spaces you were meant to occupy of the people you admire. And that was true with you at Star Trek, kind of putting yourself out there. And also now if you're a fan of Bruce Campbell and like the Sam Raimi stuff, that makes sense that you're here now too. Would you say that makes sense?
I mean, you don't want to look at it too closely, but I do say that, like, you have to take some risk and do things that you may not be comfortable doing to expand yourself and expand your range. And I think, to me, what attracted me to this project was the pilot script that Matt had written. It was really one of the best pilot scripts I've ever read, and I was very lucky that they were considering me for the show. But I think sort of what you're saying is you make your own luck, and I guess that's true. I'm also superstitious enough that I don't want to say that. So.
You know what? I'll say it for you, but because I like to reflect that too. Because when I look at my own career too, and I'm like, oh, that's so cool that I met that person, or I get along with that person. It's a good reminder to me that at the very least I've followed my heart to some extent. But
yes, absolutely. That I say all the time. You have to live with yourself. So.
Yes, totally. You have to go to sleep at night without Ambien every night. Totally.
Yeah, there's that, and I kind of think of the, fortune favors the bold kind of thing. If you don't try new things, you're not going to succeed at new things. And if you write yourself into a rut, or if you just live in that rut, you're never going to be able to break out and try these new amazing things that you're doing.
It is important. It really is important to challenge yourself and not just. I agree with that completely. Like it's always really important to reinvent as much as you can, and look for opportunities that are outside what you would consider your normal range.
So when we last wanted to talk to you, Mike and I were busy going through all of the comics, and we were loving it, and we did get to talk to the illustrator, and that was very fun. We had a really fun guessing game as to, like, okay, who was he designing? Okay, this person was meant to look like Winona Ryder. Okay, this looks like
Sigourney Weaver. This looks like Ian McKellen.
And that was just fun for us because we weren't getting paid.
It was a ton of fun. We reached out to you, and in fact, I think I posted on X that we were going to cover it, and your response was, "You're going to do a deep dive without me?" But because of the writer's strike and other things, we were like, "No, man, we'd love to have you," but you. Very wisely recused yourself from that situation, as you should.
I don't know that it would have looked good to my fellow writers if I'd been doing it.
Look at me being really successful as a writer.
Out there bragging during a strike about your...
Yeah, look at my comics. But you guys did... No, I listened to a bunch. You guys did a great job. And I would have loved to have been... joined you in the conversation.
They were full-fledged Orville episodes, man, complete with messages, morals, meanings, things that I could take away as a little nugget of, if this ever happens to me, I don't want to get stranded on a planet with, penguin people. But if something happened to me where I had to make a choice and had to make a decision, then there's enough fodder there for how to go through that decision-making process. That's interesting. That gives us something to talk about.
Yeah, well, I thank you. I set out exactly to do that, which was, as a comic book reader, as a kid, I think I was always slightly disappointed with the Star Trek comics because they never felt like they were episodes of the shows.
Oh.
I read them. And one of the things that I did in this comic, and now really do with, I've now done 2 comics since, is the one thing that I don't do is I don't do what many comics do, which is having description. It's all visuals and dialogue. And so that makes it as close to something you might see in a film or a movie as you can get with a comic, that it's all relying on the quote acting of the characters in the art, and then the dialogue, and also then the framing of each panel. So like a director, I was framing each panel, and that and I think it succeeded. Certainly the Orville comic succeeded in the way I wanted to, which is you felt like, oh, this might have been an episode.
Yeah, you've got the ability to show instead of just tell. If it was just purely the written word, which if it was a novel, you have to describe all those things. In the comic, in the graphic novel, you can show the sets, you can show certain things. But exactly to what you were saying, there was a scene where Kelly had this realization, and you can see the nugget, you can see her reaction. You could see her drop what she was holding, take off running, and then run out of the room. And that scene was, like, I was actually thinking about that scene later, and I was like, was that a scene from an episode, or was that a scene from the comic book? Because the impact was the same.
Yeah, well, that's, you're talking about the issue. I know exactly what you're talking about. That was the issue that was the sort of connective tissue of the sort of the alternate reality that led to the season 2 finale. Road Not Taken, and I wanted to do like that realization where she realizes, oh, they're here.
Wow.
Then I'm so happy you pointed that out, because that was that moment in that comic was the most important moment in the comic, and as a fan of sci-fi fan, wanting to show, like, we do all these alternate realities. Star Trek's done them, and now feels like every show is about multiverse. But what's the connective tissue of, like, what's this world like in this period where it's not going along the path?
What happened in that 7 years when Kelly went back and wouldn't go out with Ed again?
And then how did Kelly figure out, oh, I've got to do something about this now?
Right.
That is what's interesting, and I think this. I got hired to do this job to talk about the Orville, and I hadn't watched it.
Wait, you get paid for this?
Oh, no.
I got to talk to my producer.
No, I'm working for experience and exposure, Mike.
That's right. I'm working to be around professionals.
Yeah, that's what's happening. But I was so quickly not a job. And even, it's so funny that you said that, Mike. Like, you catch yourself thinking about it. Even last week, I was like, God, and then she was supposed to be on the ship, and then because she wasn't on the ship, Isaac took down the Orville, but these stories leave an impact on us in a very strong way. And I really was a champion for a long time about, hey, if you like new Star Trek, and if you like Star Trek Discovery, good for you. And a lot of people were like reflecting back to Mike and I that Orville was doing Star Trek really, or not Star Trek, but sci-fi really well. You guys really kept the torch burning for old, like, real true heart Star Trek stuff in a way that I don't really think anything else is doing nowadays.
Well, I mean, part of that also is, I mean, the four of the executive producers, 3 of them worked at Star Trek, the older Star Trek, Andre and Brandon and myself, and then, Seth is such a dyed-in-the-wool fan of that it's like we're doing something that pays homage to that kind of storytelling that we loved. But yeah, no, those I do remember I had, in doing those 2 issues and filling in the crack between Tomorrow and Road Not Taken, it was like, oh, we didn't think it through completely right, like what exactly happened. And I think I shined a couple of things, but it was it's that desire that fans have to fill in the blanks, and we're fans, and we're like, even in our show, we're filling in our own blanks, making sure that the world exists even outside of just watching the show.
And asking us not to like just buy it or, hey,
Right.
don't worry, this makes sense, because and you can certainly get too nitpicky with something, but it's nice that we have the answers. Go ahead.
Yeah, and by filling in the blanks, as you say, dare I ask the question? Are the comics canon?
Well, the way I say it is they're canon until they're not.
Yeah, sure. until they make a movie that bridges the gap.
Well, I mean, if Seth reads them and he doesn't, and I don't run the stories by him, but he always reads them and he seems very happy with them. Seth is canon. Whatever Seth wants is canon. So up to the point that we're producing a show and a show contradicts something in the comic, that comic's not canon anymore.
Well, I'm just going to start calling them the Orville Canic books.
Canic.
Yeah,
Canic books.
You can't, that's the thing too about canon, is that if you rely too much on it, it can get in the way of good storytelling. And so when I set out to do the comics, I really was trying to fit them in so that they felt like canon. But I don't know, we never reference in a show anything that happened in the comics.
Right. But what you did do with that particular comic is bridge that gap so wonderfully. I think my regret is that more people just don't know that exists.
That the comics exist.
Yeah. And maybe that's just me not knowing how to have one's finger on the pulse properly. And if it wasn't for Mike pushing it or you telling us about it, but it's so worthy of a read. I'm not a huge comic book person. I love Archie, though.
I think that's part of the problem too, is that comic books are for comic book fans, and so when you do the tie-in, you hope to get that overlap. I think you probably could read the Orville comics if you didn't watch the show, but that seems unlikely. It's going to be the other way. It's going to be, you're
more than likely.
Fan. Oh, there's a comic. But yeah, again, as you say, it's like there are some people who aren't interested in seeing a comic book version of the show they watch.
Or they just might not know it exists, especially people so ravenous for
any material.
Yeah, at this point. Yeah. And so I do think this actually segues really nicely into Space Jobs, which is great. And it's so enjoyable. And these people suck so badly. And it really is. Yeah, let's take a look at it. So this is Space Job. This is under also Dark Horse Comics, who I learned first about Dark Horse from Dr. Horrible's
reflection.
I just was going to say.
That's right, in his stomach. That's right.
Wow.
Now I'm canon somehow. That's fantastic. The captain's awful. The first officer we're introduced to right away is awful, and it seems. Correct me if I'm wrong. And this is I'm just thinking of this now. Is this your opportunity to explore all, exhaust all the bad people that could potentially exist in otherwise these idyllic futures that you had to write about?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, one of the reasons I wanted to do the Orville comic was self-centered in that I wanted to do Orville comics, but I also wanted to write comics.
Right. I'd
never written comics, and by doing the Orville comics, and they did well for Dark Horse, and then they said, "Oh, do you want to do something else?" And so Space Job is the idea that it came out of this idea sometime in the 80s. I read this article about Star Trek, and it was a kind of slightly humorous article, but that basically they were describing that Star Trek is about the perfect bureaucracy. Like everything works. Like somebody needs help, the ship goes and they help them, and the Star Trek, the Starfleet are the cops, they're the hospitals, they're the fire.
Oh.
They're also delivering grain. It's a whole bureaucracy, and it's perfect. No person gets in the way of the bureaucracy. And I just thought Well, that's not actually realistic.
There's a yang to that yin.
And that the idea was, in fact, I wrote Space Job originally as a pilot script of like a comedy that was basically The Office on the bridge of the Enterprise. That because most comedy is about most workplace comedy is about a bad boss. That a captain being sort of a coward and self-centered and off for themselves was kind of a great basis of a comedy, and that your main character is sort of caught under the working for a terrible captain. And part of it also was this is a reach that people aren't necessarily going to do, but I'm also a fan of the Caine Mutiny. Not really, I'm a fan of the movie, but the book, The Caine Mutiny, is very much about that.
Mm-hmm. I'm so unaware of that. Mike, do you know what he's
about?
Yeah,
I sure do. The movie is probably most famously done with Humphrey Bogart, a mutiny on a United States naval ship. Right. But I think at this point I'm out of my depth, and we'll go back to our guest.
The book is written by a writer named Herman Wouk, who also wrote War and Remembrance and a lot of Winds of War, and he's and the book is based partially on his experience in the Navy in World War II, and it's about that this quote that he's famous for is that the Navy is something that was designed by geniuses to be run by idiots, and that this book is a great book if you're into like the genre of this, about this ensign who ends up on this ship, and just like the bureaucracy of the Navy, and funny, touching, exciting, and that inspired this captain character, which I play completely comedically, and the idea that you're stuck on this ship in the future working for a terrible captain, and that's really what the comic is.
The character is Captain Queeg, if I remember. Is that correct?
In the community, yeah.
And
Olivier in Space Job. So.
And have you ever had strawberries stolen from you? And how far would you go to find the perpetrator?
Well, that's your Caine Mutiny reference. I know. I'm not going to explain that.
Exactly.
I'm not going to explain that to Jessica.
What did you take from the Orville comics?
I'm just gonna sit back and enjoy.
What did you learn with the Orville comics? You mentioned that being your first time. You worked with David Cabeza. You had an illustrator. You had somebody do the lettering.
Right.
We had David on our show. He was a phenomenal guest.
Right.
What did you learn through that process that helped with with Space Job, and then later with the
brand new
Masked Macher?
Yes.
Well, before I wrote the comics, I reached out to two comic writers who I knew, a guy named Jeff Johns, who's very, very successful comic book writer, has done a lot of stuff at DC with Green Lantern and Flash, and just a big, and he's also a TV writer and movie writer. And then a guy named Gary Duggan, also who written the Deadpool comics, and a lot of other things, and they kind of gave me sort of hints about how people read comics and where, what should be at the end of an even page, because that's the page you turn. So you want something at the end of the even page that gets you to turn. It's very, very cool things that I learned from them. And then the people at Dark Horse, my editor at Dark Horse, also gave me some hints about how many panels you should have on a page. But other than that, I was pretty much on my own. They gave me the format, and really did what I learned was, especially if you're trying to write something that's going to be funny, it really is important to be detailed about what's in each panel and where essentially the camera is. I'm over this guy's shoulder. I'm looking at this guy's reaction. There's one shot in Space Job that takes place with the captain sitting on a toilet. But I didn't really want to show that, so we show his pants around his ankles looking out the door at his crewman. And that got everything across. But I didn't want to show someone sitting on the toilet. I thought that wouldn't be would sort of hurt the joke in a certain way.
The captain's log, though, is the best button. I had to put it down for a second because someone was waiting to. It just was. Right. It was really right. It was really good.
That was probably the first joke I wrote for the pilot. That like one of the like that was, and it was inspired by Mike Henry, who used to do log jokes all the time on Family Guy. So,
got it.
Yeah,
okay.
Lieutenant Dan on Family Guy.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Well, he's on Orville. Lieutenant Dan's on Orville.
I'm sorry, Lieutenant Dan on the Orville. Exactly right. Yeah.
So I learned you want to have a certain number of pounds on a page. But then it really was about like, based on my own experience reading comics, what did I want as a reader? And that applies, honestly, I think, to all your writing. If you want to be a writer, is you better enjoy reading what you write, because if you don't, no one else is going to either. I mean, that's the other. So,
I think the woman with Outlander did that. She's like, I want a time traveling, but but she realized it wasn't made, so she's like, fine, I'll write it. And I kind of love that philosophy. That
was against Seth's philosophy with the Orville. He felt like nobody was doing that kind of show, and he was like, "This is what I want to do, so I'm going to do it."
So it's funny. The Masked Macher also has Macher. Say it for me.
Macher. It's a Yiddish word.
Yeah, Macher.
It literally means maker, someone who makes things.
Okay.
But it actually has this. Yiddish is a really interesting language because it usually has there's the literal meaning, and then there's the kind of an implied meaning, and a macher is the big shot.
I see. He makes things.
The big shot. He made something.
Machers here. So this really seems like a departure from what we know you to write, but there is a Humphrey Bogart reference in there, which I really enjoyed. There is. And I was so annoyed at the unreliable narrator. I was like, how does he not know what a bird in the hand is? And we won't give you any spoilers because we certainly advise you to read this comic. But where did this guy come from? What made you want to tell this story? What was going on?
Well, this is also another failed pilot. So basically, I was involved with WWE. They wanted to do an animated wrestling show, and so I had a meeting with them, and so then I started to think, well, what would be a wrestling show that would be kind of different, maybe not what you'd expect. And I don't know, I just had this idea of I've always been fascinated by the idea of a masked wrestler, because the whole idea of masked wrestlers is, if he loses, you get to rip his mask off and find out who he is. But the reality is, if they ripped the mask off, you wouldn't recognize him. He'd be this. The mask
just be some regular guy. Yeah,
guy. It's not like it's not like it's Bruce Wayne under there. It's not like it's like, oh my God, it's George Bush. Like, it's not. It's the mask is what gives him the fame, his identity.
It's George Bush from Space Job,
right? Which is also
that's right. I only have 3 references.
Well, no, but that's what's good about Space Job, though, too. And if, just to go back for a second, what I really, really appreciated about it is that it really strikes me as, if we ever get to space, what happens in Space Job is how we'll do it.
That's essentially what I was trying to do. It's a job. Like, you're going to be a job on a ship, and you're going to be in the hands of everybody you're working with, and they're going to be incompetent and stupid, and it's just like any job. It's like
any job.
Pharmaceuticals will take over.
You're surrounded by idiots.
Yeah.
Merc is still a thing. I heard this the other day. I think it's life-changing. Nobody knows what they're doing. Some people do it anyway. I love that quote.
Jesus Christ.
That's a great quote.
My God. That's how I feel when most people tell me no. And I'm like, you were probably just told that you had to say no, and you don't know the answer. But
can I ask you about the reference? Because you mentioned Humphrey Bogart, the two against the world reference.
Yeah.
Why use that movie to? And first of all, you go 1930s Hollywood. I'm hooked from Jump Street. So then you throw that in there. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So the idea was of I like the idea of this wrestler, this actor who becomes this masked wrestler. He's in Hollywood. He has this desire to be a big shot, to be a big movie star, and he's not really that talented, and ends up in this down and out wrestling arena in 30s Hollywood, where this is the place that all the big wrestling moves were created by this Japanese fellow, and that there's a woman who's wrestling as pretending she's a man, and it's run by this shady lady, and who is missing her nose due to syphilis, and it ends up being sort of a comment to me about Hollywood, that there are all these people doing. In this case, there are some really talented people in this wrestling arena. And also future heavyweight champion Joe Louis is somehow in this wrestling. And
because of course he is.
And that they're at the mercy of this mediocre actor, and that it's sort of a comment on like people and their passions and where it leads them, and then and sort of the Hollywood drive. The guy's name is Tony Hollywood, and he wants to be this big Hollywood star, and he finds himself finally in a place where he is kind of appreciated and needed, but he's still got his eye on something that's really out of his reach. And that's kind of what the comic's about, but it's comedic. And then there's this big surprise at the end of the first issue of who's been narrating it, and that makes it a comic book. Like the surprise is like you're doing something that you could only do in a comic book. Like I don't think maybe an animated movie, but I don't know that. Anyway, I had developed this whole thing as an animated series that would take place in 30s Hollywood around this wrestling arena. And then just as I finished my pitch and they loved it, the company decided, we're not interested in doing animated shows anymore. So It went away, but I still had all the material that I had created, and I brought it to Dark Horse, and they said, yeah, do it as a comic. So.
Well, I had a few questions about the narrator, but that definitely was the payoff, I think, for this first issue.
Oh, I'm so frustrated with him, so mad at him.
I will leave that alone. By the way, I love the whole trope of the unreliable narrator because nobody remembers anything. Eyewitness accounts are notoriously terrible. All right. So you actually asked a question that I had in my notes that I didn't want to Google on my own because I was afraid of what would show up on my social media and my Google feed. But it is possible, apparently, to lose one's nose from syphilis.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Actually, I learned that from watching another television show. That's the level of education that I have. I've learned everything from TV, but it's this great show. If you've never seen it, it's called The Nick. And it's about a hospital in New York in the 19th century. Starred Clive Owen. It was on Showtime or Cinemax. It was on Cinemax. Great show. Really, really good show. It's kind of been, again, gets lost in all the slew of shows that come out, but quality television. Great show.
Well, I will look into that.
In some ways horrifying, talking about doctors at this time where it really was still very primitive, and it's great show.
Oh, I
will look at that for more cautionary tales for future conditions that I will try to avoid.
Well, it was illustrated very well too, because I was like, okay, well, are we dealing with an altered timeline? Because something is up with her nose. Is it metal? Obviously, you're like you said, the reveal at the end is only something that could happen in a comic book, and so I thought we were kind of getting humans that might have had supplemental things, but it was so great to also go, we're all wondering about it. This is what happened to that lady.
There was a little counter Earth, vibe going on there. Yeah, sure. From the Marvel comics.
Who knows? And the other piece of it too is as you go on, Jessica, I love that you called him the unreliable narrator, because that's also what this comic is about. The stories that I tell all the way through, you're not giving away that the narrator is somebody who's being interviewed later. That's not really
right.
And the interviewer starts like, wait a second, that couldn't have happened, and and that's also sort of part part and parcel of this, like this glorified view that we take of the past sometimes is always like through somebody's personal lens, and people have you believing things that may probably didn't happen.
I am actually getting to the point in my life now and the age in my life where I actually, I was so certain that I said something the way I said it, and now, well, there's two sides of that coin. It's going to be misinterpreted. Maybe what I meant to impart wasn't quite said, or someone walks away with an impression I didn't mean to give, but how I delivered it, that's how they took it. But then there's the other part where I absolutely said the wrong thing, and I've convinced myself I said the right thing. So that's also something I'm just dealing with as I'm aging, which is, and I'm not meaning to be like, look at me, it's so old, everything's so difficult. But I'm just saying the capacity for what my brain tells me is true and what I believe. You can convince yourself something happened that really didn't happen.
Well, when you get to my age, you get very forgiving of that in yourself and other people. A few minutes ago, I said Lieutenant Dan from Family Guy. I 100% thought I said Lieutenant Dan from the Orville.
Seth got mad at both Mike and I when we were talking about Ted, the series, because we both said the different incorrect names of characters, and he was very gentle
versus
about
Bethany
it.
And
he was gentle until it became too much, and he's like, "This is what this person's named. That's what this person is named."
We're talking about Donnie the dump truck, and not Dennis, and Brittany, and not Bethany, and
it matters.
It was all too much.
Big scheme of things. So I see you got a couple more questions here for our good friend David, a good man, Mike.
David, a good writer. Dan Sheridan, any relation to Captain John Sheridan from Babylon 5?
No, I was combining Danny Sheridan. I was combining the names of two Family Guy writers, Danny Smith and Chris Sheridan.
Oh, that's brilliant. So I noticed and I think this is early enough in Space Job that it's not a spoiler. The jump rings, the space warp rings. They were found beyond the 9th planet. Are you a 9-planet guy, David? Or do you still hold on to Pluto?
I didn't catch that.
I'm not sure I caught it either.
Because that's what we were raised with, right?
Yeah, we're raised with 9 planets. We're raised with 9 planets. Yeah. Maybe the alien who's telling you that is that's the character. I'm not.
And also, in the future, you're like, I didn't say it. It was them. The other thing is that, like, in the future, we may find a new 9th planet. Like, maybe it's called Meta or Planet X. There could be. It's the future. They might find another one between now. So I did leave the door open for that. I was like, maybe take out Pluto, insert new 9th planet, boom.
No, I got it. It's the old lady's nose.
Were you surprised by what happens to the first officer on the page?
They certainly did not make it out of the first act.
So what's interesting is the illustration was similar to the lead, the captain. So I wasn't sure if it was. I wasn't sure if this was like his rise up until when we meet him, and then I was so glad what happened to him. I was so glad. And that
was intentional, yeah.
It was no, and it was so good, but it also gives you really good. That's what I was kind of saying. It feels like you can blow off some steam and say a couple things that like you want to say about and commentary about today. Yeah. As opposed to going, look at us. I'm watching a lot of Voyager right now, and Janeway, I have my principles, and for you. But like sometimes people suck and they get to the top.
And this guy, I don't know how they spoke, but I'm going to buck them back to ensign, unless they're already an ensign. Then I'm going to make sure they stay there. It's like, dude, man, you're not even...
But these guys exist. And
right away.
They do.
Yeah.
No, I was happy what happened to him, and now it feels like a Chekhov's chair situation. Anytime someone sits on it, because I was so confused why he was being given the big chair, and I was like, wait, that's not your chair. It's very enjoyable.
I thought he was being set up. There's it kind of reminded me of the end of Star Trek Nemesis, where Riker sets up the new first officer.
That's a deleted scene, though.
Right. Good call. Yeah, because you never see that first officer in the movie.
Right, that poor guy.
It's like call him Jean-Luc. He likes that. So we're still waiting for Star Wars Detours. Any update on that?
You're still waiting on that. Yeah.
Oh, do you have a copy of it?
I don't. There are no copies. I mean, I think actually maybe Seth Green and Matt Senreich have maybe something, but I've seen a couple of episodes, but they're locked away. It's very sad. It'd be wonderful to see that.
That's too bad. And I think by the time this episode drops, we'll have issue number 2 of the Masked Macher.
Oh yeah,
how many are planned? What's the case?
Well, we got 4, and then if it sells well enough, then I'll do more. But because the story expanded, and I'm excited. I think it's definitely, and the art that Alex and Gonzalo did is amazing, and I don't know, it's a very cool comic. I think it came out great.
Okay.
You're a very busy and involved person.
It seems like I'm very busy. I don't feel very busy, but thank you.
I was once told by a fellow creative that you need other creatives to reflect back to you your career, because it happens over such a long time. Right.
You don't feel But
you have a TV show also dropping in a month. You know what I mean?
Well, the Futurama. There's a new.
Oh yes.
I have a couple new Futuramas. Well, one came out last year. One just dropped in June, I think, or July. It's called The Temp. And they're both, and the one I did last year, the related to items you viewed, which is this comment on Amazon.
Oh, I think we talked about that when we had you on before.
Yeah.
And it had yet to drop. What is that like now, being back to Futurama? What do you think?
Well, it's so much fun to get to go back, but I only work there for like 3 weeks because I'm doing a freelance, and then it disappears, and then 8 months later, it's like, it's on Hulu.
Wow.
So, but I love working there. I love the guy, Dave Cohen, and Matt and Ken Keeler, and it's a fun staff.
That is so much fun that you're back there, and I'm sure anybody listening to this show is well aware that you wrote Where No Fan Has Gone Before, the Star Trek reunion episode.
It was an idea that there were 20 years between my first Futurama and my second Futurama.
That might be a record. Now, but they called you back, so they like you, right?
Clearly. I was like, all right, maybe we'll fire
So is the industry returning to some kind of normalcy? We had COVID, we had a writer's strike, we had an actor's strike. You are very involved with the Writers Guild. Are you starting to sense some normalcy returning to it, or is the world just different and it's going to stay that way?
It's a good question, and I'm not sure I know the answer. I think that they have to make stuff. They still have to do that. And there really was the strike was tough on so many people. And then the companies themselves have to figure out their business models, and there's consolidation, like what's going on with Paramount right now.
Right.
And, so the other piece of it is that you get into these quarter cycles, and it's just like, well, we'll wait till the first of the year. And there's lots of internal things that go on in these companies that I don't really fully understand. But I hear inklings from writers that work is slowly starting to come back. But I do think also there was this huge contraction that just happened to time out around the same time that we went on strike. It wasn't caused by the strike, and it didn't cause the strike. The strikes were about other things, but the companies that went all in on streaming, they were just producing hundreds of shows and all this stuff, and now they're producing a lot less, but it's sort of getting back to the normal that was 5 or 6 years ago in terms of the number of people who were going to be hired and the number of shows they were going to be doing. And then COVID really killed theatrical films, but that's slowly coming back. They're both starting to see that again too. So yeah, I mean, it's coming back, but who knows what the new normal is.
That's right.
And just, comparison, before after from last time we had you, we kind of signed off with what else are you working on? You let us know about Honor Society with Angari Rice and Gabe Mazzarata. Wow. That was the last time we that you were on Jessica's show previous to that, but that was the last time we sat down and talked, not in person. I've seen you a couple of times since. But man, what a phenomenal movie. And you were recognized for your work. I've been I've been shouting it from the rooftops. That movie was just so much fun. And you were recognized for your work on that with
I won a Writers Guild Award in the category, which was it's like a made for TV motion picture. And that was an incredible honor to have writers acknowledge that it's blind judging in that case, and that it's a the scripts are submitted without names on them, and so it's just writers reading the scripts, and it's called it's like a panel award. It's like a panel of writers decide, and so that obviously huge honor to have my script recognized.
Oh, that's phenomenal. Yeah, because it takes any bit of popularity contest or politics or anything out of it. It's just looking at the work. So comic book writer, Futurama, Hysteria, which I absolutely freaking love. What is it? Death Crunch? Is that the name of the band?
Name of the band, yeah.
Usually on Mission Log, sometimes we make up band names as we go through an episode. But you did that for us on this one.
Yeah. Well, again, that was all Matt, but it's a fun, and there's some great music in the show too, like both licensed heavy metal, but also great original songs that were composed for the band. It's a really fun show. I think. I think it appeals to the young and old alike. It's going to appeal to kids in high school who have these same fantasies of being in bands and falling in love, and then also to adults who were kids in the 80s, and then also parents who are parents now. And it's a good show. I'm very proud of it.
And we talked about it before. That's premiering on Peacock, and that's coming
October
out
18th.
October 18th. So get your Peacock subscription, folks.
And we'll be at New York Comic Con on the 17th doing a panel showing half hour of it, and panel with Bruce Campbell and Anna Camp and Julie Bowen and the creator Matt Cain and I on October 17th. So.
Well, Jessica and I are available to moderate panels. We are well experienced in that. So.
They got somebody else. I wanted to moderate it. They didn't let me. So
you would have been a perfect moderator for that. Jeez.
Oh well, whatever.
It's all, speaking of like what you said, a popularity contest. Sometimes the panel world is like, well, I run this convention, and I'm going to be the one who's going to host this book. Good for them. Good for them.
No, well, it'll be a fun panel, I think.
Totally. Good for you. David, you are definitely someone we would call a friend of the show, not just because we have to, but because
a friend of the show and somebody who we talk to, and it's I think at everybody
easy.
You get to a point in your life where things are working, things are okay, and it's like, okay, I can ride this wave for a while, or I can try something else. I can try to catch a new wave, and talking to you and several times now, it's just, man, it's go out there and catch a new wave, man. Just that's what I get from talking to you. Try something new, challenge your comfort zone.
I appreciate that. I a lot of it still is earning a living, which I know that's like, but you've got to always that's the thing in this field. You've got to. You really do have to challenge yourself always, I think. I mean, I think there are some people who reach a level where they don't have to anymore, but I think for most of us in this creative field, you just have to keep trying, keep reinventing. Yeah.
I call it traversable skills. Say that again.
You also have lots of I'm a geek like all others, and I have lots of geek interests that I'm interested in pursuing. What were you going to say, Jessica?
Well, no, I was just saying I call it traversable skills. It's like, well, hey, maybe I'm not 100% this person, but I'm going to learn how to be, or because it is earning a living, but we do get to be fortunate and say in our in our skill
Right.
set, in our
Yeah,
world.
no, right, absolutely.
But if you just going back to the wave metaphor, if you just ride that wave, eventually that wave is going to crash and it's going to run out of energy.
Absolutely
so you
right.
have to
Absolutely right.
catch a different wave.
Mike, as a
That's absolutely
pilot,
right.
though, you talking about waves is very scary to me. You have to be.
It's all
if you
about
see a wave,
it's
there's
all
a problem.
It's all about energy management. That's what it is all about energy management. You don't want
No,
you
that's
don't want,
absolutely true. You can't. You can't fall back on your laurels. You always have to look ahead.
Just to get personal for a second, I was really making a lot of money in 2019. I was really tired. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to take a knee. I don't need to have supplemental income. And then the pandemic happened and it taught me a big lesson about, because my job that I was doing that was a regular thing that was in my field washed up. And it was a really good lesson that, like, cool, you're not in survival mode anymore, but you still kind of had to keep the engine going. So
Right.
just interesting.
Yeah.
So have we left any stone unturned? Anything else you're working on you want our listener to know about?
No, that's all good stuff. I think I really would have liked to spend more time talking about the Orville comics in a deep way with you guys, but because that you really did hit on some really cool stuff on your podcast. So, but that's my one regret. I had to give up a lot of things during the strike, but that was one of them.
Well, we can always, they live in perpetuity, so we can revisit those if you like.
Well, I was going to put it out into the universe that when we finally get season 4, we'll need the bridge over to season 5, and so, or we don't have. I don't think we have. Do we have 3.5? Is that what you did?
No,
can't
1.5 and 2.5.
Okay, so we need the 3.5 to bridge us the 5 years or so. We're gonna jump until we get the series again.
Sadly, I don't know that they're going to do more Orville comics, which is really sad.
Well, that's too bad. And I could, everyone's doing hashtag Morville, and I could do hashtag Morville.
And you already told us you're not writing the autobiography of Ed Mercer.
Well, you never know. I don't want to say. I don't want to. You got Andre's book. Are you guys talking to Andre about his book?
Yeah, we just got an advanced copy of it from Dark Horse Comics, so we're going to get Andre on the show.
Yeah, that's great. I thought he did a great job.
Yeah. Hey, if people are interested in following you, which you are very informative to follow online. Where can folks find you?
I'm on Instagram at David A. Goodman 1 and Twitter or I don't know how much longer I'll be on there, but
I know.
But I've forgotten my Twitter, but you can find it pretty David. I think it's David A. Goodman.
Easy to find.
And those are the 2 places I'm not on TikTok or anything yet. So,
David, this was so wonderful, Michael.
Thank you guys for having me on.
This was great.
It's always great talking to you guys.
And best of luck with the comics. I hope there's 10 more, 12 seasons.
I hope so too.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And really looking forward to Hysteria. Mission Log, The Orville is produced by Roddenberry Entertainment. Technical production by the incredible Earl Green. Our website and your opportunity to comment and connect with us is podcasts.roddenberry.com. If you'd like to support us, you can do so at patreon.com/missionlog.
We'll have more supplemental episodes and some big news coming soon. This is a Roddenberry podcast. For more great podcasts, visit podcast.roddenberry.com.